Tears of the Kingdom is an amazing game. You know it, I know it, and so does the entire gaming industry. The sequel to Breath of the Wild absolutely blew me away with its fantastic story, robust gameplay, and physics engine, and hundreds of hours worth of content. However, despite the fact I can sing this game's praises for days, it does have some problems. On this channel, I've never actually made a video complaining about anything before, so I figured, why not make a video discussing the problems with one of 2023's biggest releases. Strap in, this is going to be a good one. Also, please keep in mind that this is all coming from a fan of the series, just not some newcomer. My first Zelda game may have been Breath of the Wild, but since then I have played almost every Zelda game out there, and I have developed a great love and respect for the series. If you find yourself enjoying the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I might even make more videos complaining about other stuff in the future. With all that out of the way, let's get right into it. Okay, in this video, we'll be starting small and covering progressively bigger problems as we go along, starting with Koroks. Now, I don't mind that they are back. The only problem is that there still isn't a worthwhile reward for finding all of them. The only thing you get is an extra layer of Korok excrement and an additional sad feeling. Coming from somebody who beat Breath of the Wild 100% and is rapidly approaching the same in Tears of the Kingdom, it really sucks that I now need to not only get all 900 Korok seeds again, but an additional 100. If Koroks return in another Zelda game, please Nintendo, don't make them a collectible. Not again. Okay, next up, let's talk about Tears of the Kingdom's bosses, because while I think they are far better than anything Breath of the Wild offered, with just one exception, they still aren't very good. I honestly really enjoyed fighting them all the first time around in their respective dungeons, but fighting them all again in the depths made me realize that I don't really like fighting them. In fact, the only bosses in the game I can confidently say that I like are Colgera, all of Ganondorf's phases, and the Master Koga fights. And even then, aside from the first and last time you fight him, Master Koga is so pitifully easy that the fight was over before it had even begun. These bosses are a great step in the right direction, but they are more successful in theming and design departments than in actual gameplay. Let me know your thoughts on these bosses down in the comments. Okay, next, I briefly want to bring up dungeons. Now, before you come after me, I just want to say that the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom are fantastic, easily beating anything Breath of the Wild tried to do. But if you were like me and tried to do everything in the games in the correct order, then you likely would have gone to the Wind Temple first. Now, the problem with this is that, well, the Wind Temple is the best dungeon in the game, so when I visited the Fire Temple, I wasn't disappointed, but I don't know, I felt a little let down. The Water Temple was next, and this one definitely takes second place. Hell, the OST alone could bump it up to first if we were just talking about music. And finally we have the Lightning Temple, which, I don't know, I liked the Indiana Jones vibe that was set in the beginning, but the rest of it was kind of eh. Not to mention Riju's ability is terrible, which kind of brought down the experience for me. Speaking of sages, oh boy do we have a lot to talk about. I want to know who at Nintendo designed the sages, because I have something to say to them. Why? Hey, boss. Yeah? So you know the champions from Breath of the Wild? Yeah? Well, what if we took the simple button press that activated their powers and turned them into characters that walked around with Link, so that every time he needs to use one, they all crowd together and run away from him? My god. An idea I saw Hyrule Gamer bring up in his very similar purely coincidental video on Tears of the Kingdom's problems was the idea of changing this useless map ability in the ability menu to a sage ability submenu. But no, instead we need to run over to the sages and manually activate their powers. This wouldn't be so much of a problem if the sages were, good. Now I will demonstrate the ways to avoid using the sage abilities. Except for you, of course, you're pretty cool. Hot in the desert and don't want to run a marathon to reach Sidon so you can cool yourself off? Simply, get this, change clothes. Running low on bombs and weapons and need to get through some rocks? Just get a cannon. Need to power your arrows with electricity? Use anything, and I mean anything, but Riju's ability. Want to have a shield that protects you from damage? Don't get hit. Need I go on? The only time I have used Visages is in their dungeons. Yes, that includes even Tulin, who I have maybe only used about 3 times outside of the Wind Temple. Please change the way Visages work in the next game if they are in it. Please. I would take anything over this. Okay, staying on the topic of dungeons and sages, let's talk about the 4 identical elephants in the room, the cutscenes at the end of the dungeons. For some reason, they are exactly the same. Almost shot for shot, in fact. Even the dialogue is pretty much recycled. I don't really have a lot to say here, but I can't think of why they didn't at least try to make these cutscenes a little bit unique. At least the Spirit Temple's cutscene is different, fantastic even. This one just confuses me. In fact, in playthroughs going forward, I'm going to skip these cutscenes, unfortunately, which sucks because the cutscenes in this game for the most part are pretty good. In fact, the only one I'm not going to skip is this one, because the funny Goron man says the funny.
I'd like nothing more than to smash the Demon King.
Now onto the big one. In the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom, I was so excited to see how the land of Hyrule had changed, and how the people reacted to this change. With Link and Zelda now reunited and traveling across Hyrule, I was looking forward to seeing how people now look at Link with recognition. What we got was not that. For some reason, Nintendo decided it would be a good idea to wipe the memories of almost every character in the game. I understand that Nintendo doesn't really do direct sequels, and they've never done one like this before. But I don't understand why they changed so much for the people who haven't played Breath of the Wild. I'm sorry, I understand that not everyone has played Breath of the Wild, obviously. But this game is a sequel, something that everybody knew going into it. So if you miss out on events from Breath of the Wild and don't know what's going on, I don't think it's up to the developers to cater to that. This really frustrates me because it makes no sense for some characters to have forgotten Link. The key examples I point to most often are the stable owners and Bolson. Starting with the stable owners, we know that after Breath of the Wild, Zelda travelled across Hyrule, helping the people of the kingdom where she could. This included the various stables sprinkled across Hyrule, all of which made contact with Zelda at some point or another. Now, from what we know about Link, from his personality to what Zelda says about him in her diary, we know that he was with her every step of the way. If this is the case, then why does no one of the stables remember him? Moving on to our more egregious example, Bolson. Sometime shortly after her rescue and the Calamity's defeat, Zelda went about the task of preparing for Hyrule's future. It was at this time that she commissioned Bolson to construct a school in Hateno Village, which was Bolson's last job up until the upheaval. Seeing as Link was likely with Zelda when the school was being constructed, there is no reason why Bolson wouldn't remember him. Not only this, but he also doesn't remember anything about Link purchasing his own house, something that we know Breath of the Wild Link did as a fact because... oh, well, would you look at that? There it is. As well as this, Zelda had likely moved in with Link at this point, so this only makes the problem worse. Bolson somehow doesn't remember the guy that Hyrule's princess is not only living with, but likely would have helped build the school in some way or another, or would have at least been around when it was happening. So many other characters who should remember Link simply just don't for some reason. Hestu, everyone in Tarrytown except for Hudson and Ronderson, not to mention almost every Hyrulean outside of Lookout Landing. At this point I'm rambling, but you get the idea. The decision to essentially gut all of Breath of the Wild's character development and interaction both baffles and disappoints me to no end, especially as one of the things I was most excited about Tears of the Kingdom was its connection to Breath of the Wild, a connection that unfortunately is mostly lost in the sequel. My problems with Tears of the Kingdom's story don't really end here, but, I mean, I don't like complaining for long periods of time, so I'll leave it up to these guys on screen to discuss what their problems are, because I share a lot of their same feelings. I'll link their videos in the description if you want to check them out and see what I'm talking about. Quickly before we finish, at the time of writing this video, us fans have received some bad news. It was recently confirmed that there are no plans for future content for Tears of the Kingdom. I have seen mixed reactions online, but I and many others believe that this is a big mistake. I understand that Nintendo is more focused on having fun in their games. Heck, the reason why they aren't making any DLC for the game is because they feel like they've done everything they can. But at the same time, I think there's so much potential. Granted, most of it is story-based, a factor that Nintendo isn't too fussed about, but off the top of my head, I can list so many ideas. The origins of the Zonai, upgrading the Master Sword, learning about the ancient hero, Cass, Twin Rover, and so much more. I want Nintendo to move on from the world of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, but at the same time, I don't want it to go. No DLC is a real shame. While this video has been entirely focused on the aspects of Tears of the Kingdom that I do not agree with or like, I still love this game, a game that by far tops my list of favourite games and will be my selection for Game of the Year. Tears of the Kingdom isn't a perfect game, not by a long shot, but I'll be damned if it doesn't feel like one. You simply need to look at the community when it comes to this game, from the challenge runs, to the monstrosities being created with Ultra Hand, to all the people simply sitting down and playing the game, alone, with an audience, or with friends. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I very much hope you enjoyed it. I apologize for the lack of uploads as of late. I've been really busy with school at the moment, and it isn't going to get easier as I approach exams, but I know you guys don't mind having to wait a bit for videos. This one was a bit of a shorter one, but I've got some other things planned that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. Please feel free to go down to the comments section below and tell me one of your favorite and least favorite aspects of Tears of the Kingdom. I read all of my comments, so don't worry about yours being missed. With all that said and done, I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe and stay subscribed.